Hello and welcome to IBM Cast Iron Web API demo. In this demo, we will learn how to create a simple assembly API. Particularly, you will learn how to create an assembly API, implement its resources, and manipulate the response. We will look at how to delete and transform or change elements on the response. For demonstration purposes, we will be using JKHLE Airways' baggage status API. With that, let's begin the demo. First, we understand the services that are available on JKHLE Airways. The baggage status is available in two formats, the XML and the JSON format. Click on the XML link to see what it looks like. In the baggage status response, you get bag. For every bag, you get an ID, a status, a check-in location, a check-in time, current location, and a destination. The JSON representation of the same service will look something like this. First need to get. Let us now begin the cast iron web API demo. In this demo, we are creating a simple assembly. To start, we need to log in to the cast iron web API website. You sign in as your administrative user. Now that we are on our landing page, there are many ways to begin starting to develop your API. You could hit create, or you could straight away go to create and implement APIs by clicking APIs. What you need to do here is to provide a name for your API. In our case, let's just name it baggage API. For a context, we'll give the example as baggage. In the description, I just say baggage API. Create. You've now created the definition of your API and named it baggage API. Also note the base URL of your API as shettyinfotech.ciweb-qa.castiron.com/baggage. To further configure resources in your API, click on Edit. When you come to the resource definition page, you need to select what your API is going to look like. In our case, we are going to retrieve status. So let's just give the name, the resource URI as status. Add a description. And click add. You now successfully created your first resource. If you can again note, it also gives you the entire URL to which you can make a call to provide or to retrieve the status of your baggage. Click on Edit to further continue implementing your API. And in this case, we're implementing the status API. On the resource details section, there are many things that you should note. Since this example does not have parameters, you see that it understands that there are no parameters required for this particular API. So that means there is no request parameters required. If you intend to provide request headers, you could provide names, and as you can see, it's pre-populated with all the different kinds of HTTP headers that you would want to configure. You can also provide a description as to what you want those APIs to mean. In the request body, which is of course not very relevant to us, you can provide a sample or an example of the request body as a JSON or XML. In the response body, you must mention what your API is going to return eventually. In our case, as we've said that we want a transformed API, a transformed resource, we will provide the end result of our resource operation as transformed status. So what we are going to expect as a response is JSON that says bags, some examples, um, 4 fields or 4 elements for every bag, ID, status, check-in location, and check-in time. Now that we've created a sample for the response body, if we tab out, you can save the resource. Let's now move ahead and implement this resource. Since we do not have any request parameters, we can straight away go to creating our first get operation. To configure the get operation, click on HTTP get operation over here. If you have created existing connections before, they would appear in your list of existing connections. In our case, I did create jkhleairways.appspot.com as something that I configured before. Let me just select it. Selecting that populates the host name, the port, and the URL that you want to go for. To test the connection, we say connect. As you can see, the resource is saved and also the connection test has succeeded. Going back to the connect section, it is important to notice that we are going to make our call, or rather Cast Iron Web API is going to make a call to jkhleairways.appspot.com at port 80 for the URL baggage.json. Now let's define what the response body of this particular resource or service provides. In reality, the actual service at the backend at JKHLE provides a lot more detail than we expect to show in our eventual response. If you can see, it provides baggage status as a root node. It gives you bags and then followed by multiple parameters like ID, status, check-in location, check-in time, current location, and destination as well. We define that we are going to be receiving responses like this from the actual backend. Tabbing out or clicking on any other area saves the data into the text field. Having done this, we can now move on to the Configure tab to configure our API. On the left, you see the request parameter, the HTTP GET operation that we just created, and the response. We have created and we have configured all the information for the HTTP GET operation. When it comes to configuring the response, click on the response, and as you can see, it provides you with the values that are available from the available response. You could either select your details over here, which is ID, or you could go to map values and select, drag and drop the mapping from the available values, which is the actual response, to the eventual target response on the right. In our case, we need to move, or we need to connect status with the eventual response for the status element. The check-in location is also connected. So does the check-in time. Having done this, we have now ensured that all the values that appear in the ID, status, and check-in location and the check-in time will flow through to the eventual response, which is in the transform status root node. Now let's try and see how we can change or manipulate the responses available in Castine. Let's just look at on the status. Clicking on plus provides you with the configuration option of several number and string manipulations. Let's just try and say that we would want to see an uppercase value of the actual status. Having done this, we go back to our resource details page and our review is complete. We go to the baggage API. Before we begin our test, we must ensure that we provide entitlements to every resource. Click on entitlements. For now, let's just say we want to create a basic entitlement that allows you per minute. Provide the number as 10 and click add. We are now ready to test our first API. Before we do that, we need to activate or start our Castine Web API resource. Clicking on this right arrow button called activate starts the resource. Now that we have a notification that the resource is activated successfully, we can go ahead to our test tab to actually try the actual response. Select status, as it is the only API resource that we had configured. In the application, we select test application, which is provided straight away from Castine Web API. And since we do not have any parameters, all we do is go ahead and click test. As you can see, the request flew through Castine Web API. We received a 200 response. We also received a JSON payload where we received what we expected, which is transform status. We did receive these 4 elements that we had configured and mapped. And please note that the data transformation that we applied as upping the case of the status value has also been effected. On belt and on plane appear in uppercase. With this, we conclude our demo to show you how Castine Web API can be used to create a simple API assembly, and also how we can transform the data.